I can remember when Grant Shapps was Transport Secretary. We've probably had about 6 Transport Secretaries since then, to be honest, saying at the party Tory conference, we've got the laws ready to put into place. We're now being told any laws to try and curb these strikes will take months to enforce. They've still got a majority of 70.
Absolutely, and this was in the 2019 manifesto,
Yes.
so they have a mandate for this. Yeah, I think absolutely, get on with it.
There's some suggestion, well, the Prime Minister suggested at PMQs yesterday he could go further than we thought and actually ban emergency workers from having a strike, i.e. that would be ambulance workers, maybe nurses, doctors, not sure, but certainly ambulance workers, in the same way the police are already banned from going on strike.
I kind of wish that these measures weren't necessary. I wish that these workers who are going on strike would think again and think about that spirit of kind of collective responsibility that we had in the pandemic. These strikes are deliberately timed to cause the maximum amount of pain, deliberately timed to ruin the first Christmas that people have had in years. And I wish that getting tough on these unions wasn't necessary. I wish workers would think about their own responsibility and what they're doing to ordinary people.
I suppose the unions would say, look, we didn't plan this to be around the Christmas time. A lot of us have been in discussions for long periods with our employers and are frustrated, as I suppose right across the board most people are, that wages aren't keeping up with the cost of living. And it is an incredibly difficult time for earners at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone can sympathise with everyone who's struggling with the cost of living. And obviously, different strikes are happening for different reasons. So, you know, there are some workers who you might be more sympathetic to, like nurses, for example. However, you know, they're making pretty big pay demands. But the fact is, these strikes are all coming at once. It's like the worst possible advent calendar. Every day in December, something dreadful happening. And yeah, they're all timed to cause the maximum possible misery. And ultimately, they're counterproductive, because as we're seeing, they are stimulating the government to crack down even harder.
It smells to me like we know this is coordinated. It smells to me like this is coordinated action by the trade unions to try to cause maximum damage to the government, and to hell with the impact that has on rail commuters, people trying to get to work, people working in hospitals. Yeah,
it does feel like there's a sort of general strike fever. Coming through the unions. But I would say that there are plenty of ordinary workers in these unions who are doing this with great regret, or who actually don't really agree with their union leaders. If you look at the votes of some of the strikes for the nurses, for example, it wasn't even a majority of trusts. I call on these workers to think again about doing this. You don't have to vote for what your union tells you to do.
Alice, the Telegraph has an interesting take on all of this. They say that the Army is furious that they're having to basically do everybody else's jobs to make up for it, and yet they're being paid less than a lot of people who are in these negotiations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is a question of, you know, whenever you talk about the workers, it's not just people in the public sector, or it's not just the people who are on strike who are affected by this, it's everybody. And yeah, I mean, is it fair for the Army to have to step in?
It probably isn't, but I'm glad they are, because we need people to man the ambulances. We need people to get on those border controls, because flights are bringing people in. I mean, my worry is people will just cancel coming to Britain for the future because of all the strikes, and that's the travel and hospitality industry is already on its knees. The rail strike is going to have that impact as well on the hospitality industry. Chuck the planes into the mix, disaster.
Yeah, absolutely. For the Army, it's illegal for them to go on strike. And as I say, I think that these strikes will ultimately be counterproductive for these, especially for the rail, for example. We know that it needs to be modernised. We know that it's going to be automated.
Yeah, but the RMT say drivers can't be trusted to operate the doors. They can drive a train and they can slow a train down at high speed, but they can't be trusted to operate the doors. That has to be a guard. I
mean, this is so short-sighted, because passenger numbers on the trains are already down, and if these strikes continue, we're going to see cuts to services, we're going to see job losses in the long term. This is so short-sighted, and I wish they would think again.
And it's the same, I think, with the postal strikes. You know, my mum was saying last night she took all her Christmas cards to a carol service to hand-deliver them to her friends, rather than relying on the postal service. And she said, going forward, she just thinks it's going to be counterproductive for post. A lot of people don't use it anyway. It's sort of killing itself.
And I've got a lovely little local card shop where I use it every year, and I said, how are you doing? They said, worst Christmas ever. Because of the strike, people aren't bothering to buy cards. They're sending their cards by email. What a sad thing that is. Really, I love to find those Christmas cards on my doormat when I get in from work. I don't get that many, to be honest. But it's nice to get the few I do.
Yeah, I think it's such a shame, and I just think if you look at history, I mean, obviously we're in a different situation now, but if you look at the miners' strike, for example, I mean, actually, funnily enough, we are opening a new coal mine now, but it's not as though that these jobs were going to last, and all it did, I think, is precipitate the closure of the mines. Now, I say, ironically, we're opening a new one now.
Which I'm rather pleased about.